The Lightbringers. As we've explored in our Dragons That Were Promised series, the title of the three heads of the dragon is synonymous with the prince that was promised. It was even further exemplified when we examined Melisandre's oversights regarding the dragon head's established criteria. This is key as we know Melisandre regarded Stannis as both the prince that was promised and Azor Ahai, and she presents them as equal when responding to Aemon. "It is the war for the dawn you speak of, my lady, but where is the prince that was promised?" "He stands before you," Melisandre declared, "though you do not have eyes to see. Stannis Baratheon is Azor Ahai come again, the warrior of fire. In him the prophecies are fulfilled. The red comet blazed across the sky to herald his coming, and he bears Lightbringer, the red sword of heroes." It's important to note here that, although Aemon later refutes the idea that Stannis' sword is the fabled Lightbringer, he does not refute Melisandre equating the prince that was promised with Azor Ahai. We later see when Aemon is discussing the prince or princess that was promised with Sam, he makes reference to Dany being born amidst salt and smoke, this being the same qualifier Melisandre attributed to Azor Ahai earlier in the books. And this connection of salt and smoke with the prince that was promised is also referenced by Marwyn, who is familiar with the prophecy as well. As we can see, the prince that was promised is synonymous with Azor Ahai, and we've previously concluded that the three heads of the dragon are synonymous with the prince that was promised, so we can safely deduce that the three heads of the dragon are also Azor Ahai. Notice how we have three names that all represent one thing, which fits perfectly with the motif of 3 into 1, which we've seen throughout this video series. Multiple aliases for Azor Ahai should not be surprising, as the world of Ice and Fire provides us with precedent that Azor Ahai had various other monikers in the past. Hirkun the Hero, Yntar, Neferian, and Eldrick Shadowchaser. So if Jon, Dany, and Tyrion are Azor Ahai, we can use what we know about this mythical figure to puzzle together meaningful insights about our dragon heads. For instance, Azor Ahai's weapon of choice is a sword called Lightbringer, and the prophecy of Azor Ahai and this fabled weapon are told by Melisandre. In ancient books of Ashai it is written that there will come a day after a long summer when the stars bleed and the cold breath of darkness falls heavy on the world. In this dread hour a warrior shall draw from the fire a burning sword, and that sword shall be Lightbringer, the red sword of heroes, and he who clasps it shall be Azor Ahai come again, and the darkness shall flee before him. But then something interesting happens. Later in the story, Melisandre tells this prophecy again, but there's a key divergence in this sequence of events. When the red star bleeds and the darkness gathers, Azor Ahai shall be born again amidst smoke and salt to wake dragons out of stone. To magnify this diverging sequence, let's first look at how they're similar. The stars bleed, darkness gathers, and a hero is reborn. But then our sequence of events deviate. In one account, Melisandre describes the next sequence as Azor Ahai drawing forth Lightbringer. In the other account, Melisandre describes the next sequence as Azor Ahai waking dragons out of stone. It's curious that Martin wrote it this way, as if these events were one and the same. To gain a clearer understanding, let's examine Lightbringer's forging, as Salladhor Saan explains to Davos. "Do you know the tale of the forging of Lightbringer? I shall tell it to you. It was a time when darkness lay heavy on the world. To oppose it, the hero must have a hero's blade, oh, like none that had ever been. And so for 30 days and 30 nights Azor Ahai labored sleepless in the temple, forging a blade in the sacred fires. Heat and hammer and fold, heat and hammer and fold, oh yes, until the sword was done. Yet when he plunged it into water to temper the steel, it burst asunder. Being a hero, it was not for him to shrug and go in search of excellent grapes such as these, so again he began. The second time it took him 50 days and 50 nights, and this sword seemed even finer than the first. Azor Ahai captured a lion, to temper the blade by plunging it through the beast's red heart, but once more the steel shattered and split. Great was his woe and great was his sorrow then, for he knew what he must do. 100 days and 100 nights he labored on the third blade, and as it glowed white hot in the sacred fires, he summoned his wife. Nisa Nisa, he said to her, for that was her name, bare your breast, and know that I love you best of all that is in this world. She did this thing, why I cannot say, and Azor Ahai thrust the smoking sword through her living heart. It is said that her cry of anguish and ecstasy left a crack across the face of the moon, but her blood and her soul and her strength and her courage all went into the steel. Such is the tale of the forging of Lightbringer, the red sword of heroes. One aspect of the forging that stands out is that the moon was cracked when the blade was completed. This is of interest, as the only other time we're told of the moon cracking is when it produced dragons, as Dorea explains to Dany. A trader from Karth once told me that dragons came from the moon, blonde Dorea said as she warmed a towel over the fire. Jaquie and Eerie were of an age with Dany, Dothraki girls taken as slaves when Drogo destroyed their father's Khalasar. Dorea was older, almost 20. Magister Illyrio had found her in a pleasure house in Lys. Silvery wet hair tumbled across her eyes as Dany turned her head, curious. The moon? He told me the moon was an egg, Khaleesi, the Lysine girl said. Once there were 2 moons in the sky, but one wandered too close to the sun and cracked from the heat. 1,000,000 dragons poured forth, and drank the fire of the sun. That is why dragons breathe flame. One day the other moon will kiss the sun too, and then it will crack and the dragons will return. Within the books, we're only ever told of the moon cracking within these 2 stories, but one version claims the result was Lightbringer and the other version claims the result was dragons. Just as Melisandre's reciting of the prophecy, Martin seems to suggest these events are one in the same. In the current story, Stannis supposedly wields Lightbringer, but many characters have questioned the authenticity of this supposed sword. Salladhor Saan says that sword was not Lightbringer. Davos notes that the sword feels no different than any other longsword. Aemon asserts that the sword is wrong, as it generates no heat and must simply be an empty glamour put on by Melisandre. Jon, after being told that the fabled Lightbringer produces its own heat, remarks that it's a pity that the sword that Stannis wields is cold. And even Stannis himself questions the legitimacy of his alleged Lightbringer. Lightbringer, Stannis gave a derisive snort. It glimmers prettily, I'll grant you, but on the Blackwater this magic sword served me no better than any common steel. A dragon would have turned that battle. It's interesting Martin frames Stannis' dialogue in this way. The juxtaposition of Stannis' Lightbringer failing where a light-bringing dragon would have succeeded. And it's this exact style of word adjacency that highlights a critical connection between Lightbringer, as it's described in the Jade Compendium, and Drogon's attack on Krasnus. As Sam explains, once Azor Ahai fought a monster. When he thrust the sword through the belly of the beast, its blood began to boil. Smoke and steam poured from its mouth, its eyes melted and dribbled down its cheeks, and its body burst into flame. Now let's contrast this against Drogon's attack on Krasnus. A lance of swirling dark flame took Krasnus full in the face. His eyes melted and ran down his cheeks, and the oil in his hair and beard burst so fiercely into fire that for an instant the slaver wore a burning crown twice as tall as his head. Lightbringer and Drogon attacking a villain, and word for word their eyes melting and dribbling down their cheeks as their bodies burst into flame, is clearly a parallel, and since no other passage within the story describes Lightbringer's attack with such obvious symmetry, it stands to reason that Martin is intentionally drawing an allusion between Lightbringer and dragons. Looking at Lightbringer under this lens makes perfect sense. Dragons, with their ability to breathe fire, are literal Lightbringers. The Lightbringer sword is fabled to produce its own heat, which is a trait dragons possess as they are notably fire-made flesh. Melisandre's divergence in recounting the prophecy seems to equate drawing Lightbringer with waking dragons. The 2 versions of the story where the moon cracked produced Lightbringer in one and dragons in the other. Stannis remarks how his false Lightbringer failed where a true light-bringing dragon would have succeeded. and Lightbringer and Drogon's attacks are written word for word to have the exact same effect. If the dragon heads are Azor Ahai and they're all destined to ride a dragon, then we have a perfect narrative fit for the sword they're foretold to wield. Dany's Lightbringer will be Drogon, Jon's Lightbringer will be Rhaegal, and Tyrion's Lightbringer will be Viserion. However, despite how flawlessly fitting this might seem, there are still some glaring issues with this interpretation of the prophecy. Dany is the one who drew forth these Lightbringers and woke dragons from their stony, petrified eggs, not Jon or Tyrion. Drogo is the only possible candidate for Nissa Nissa, but unlike Nissa Nissa, he doesn't willingly sacrifice himself, and he's already dead when the magic of the ritual takes place. The prophecy, according to Melisandre and Benero, indicates a rebirth, while the same prophecy told by the Maesters only suggests a single birth. But maybe these issues are caused by restricting ourselves to a singular perspective. As we've interpreted Lightbringer to be a literal dragon, perhaps it could be a figurative dragon as well. There's clearly room for that within the prophecy. For instance, the prophecy tells of the hero being reborn in the sea, and we know Dany's rebirth takes place not in the actual sea, but in the Dothraki Sea, which is certainly figurative rather than literal. Martin even has Illyrio Mopatis confirm exactly this later in the books. Perhaps that is the key, that in order to uncover the truths of the prophecy, one must interpret both literally and figuratively. And maybe the prophecy is not meant to be viewed under the lens of one individual, but multiple. This may be the reason that the fandom has been unable to definitively decode the prophecy. They typically keep a narrow focus grounded in just one person, just like the characters often do within the story. With that said, if we can concede that Lightbringer means dragon, then perhaps Lightbringer can also be our three-headed dragon. If we apply this perspective, previous holes within our interpretation are filled. The red sword of heroes is the Targaryen sigil, the red three-headed dragon. Each of our dragon heads is awoken or born from stone, Jon from the stone Tower of Joy, Dany from Dragonstone, and Tyrion from Casterly Rock. The Dragonhead mothers would be Nissa Nissa, as they sacrifice themselves to produce our Lightbringers, where the other two siblings or forging attempts failed. The discrepancy in the Red Priests and the Maesters is resolved, as our three heads are both born and reborn. But there are still areas within the prophecy that are left unsatisfied, and as we know, prophecy within the story is not necessarily meant to be trusted. In the next video in our series, we'll explore the nature of prophecy and how we can use what we know to determine what's ahead. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.